Good morning, everyone. This is Aditya from xDirect. We are going to discuss on the markets and the news prevailing this week, which can influence the market and different currencies. That can help you in understanding them much better. We have this agenda for now. On Monday, we have preliminary GDP data by Japan, and on Tuesday, we have monetary policy meeting by Australia. Then, along with that, we have CPI data by UK, and then building permits by US. On Wednesday, we have CPI by US and core CPI also. Apart from that, we also have very important data, that is FOMC meeting minutes by US. On Thursday, we have monetary policy statement by Japan, and also we have press conference by Bank of Japan. Then we have retail sales in the afternoon by UK, and again we have wholesale sales by Canada. On Friday, we have flash manufacturing PMI by China. We also have German flash manufacturing PMI, which is in Europe. So, starting with the presentation, preliminary GDP data generally happens to be released after every quarter, and this is from Japan, and this happens to be at 5:20 a.m. in the morning on Monday, and here we have this gives us the long-term perspective of the country's economic growth, and this also includes the inflation adjusted values, and it says that if current value is higher than the previous value, which is good for any currency, or basically it is good for Japanese yen. And generally, preliminary GDP is very important because it happens to be before the final GDP, and it gives about the economic clues about the economic condition of any country. Next comes the monetary policy meeting by Australia, and it gives us the information about the economic condition of Australia, and about the interest rate decisions, and about export conditions, and also it gives us information about the commodities market, and generally like gold and other commodities, gold, oil, and also other information from this minutes of meeting, and this will impact the interest rate decision by the Reserve Bank of Australia. If suppose say they don't raise the interest rates, which is, or they raise the interest rates, which makes Australian dollar much costlier, which shows that their economy is appreciating. Next comes the CPI data by UK, which is in the afternoon, that is 2 p.m. on the same Tuesdays. CPI, the full form is Consumer Price Index, which tells that the purchasing by purchasing of goods and services by consumers. If the data is the figures are higher than the previous, which says that there is more consumption activity happened in the last month, and which is a good sign of economic growth for the country. And it is also a very important factor because inflation also is understood using this data, and important factor for the economic development also, and this is also considered for the interest rate decisions by Bank of England. So you should really have a watch on the same. Next happens to be in the evening, we have building permits by US at 6 p.m. on the same Tuesday. And building permits generally refers to that the initial permission which is granted for any construction activity. If there is less of building permits, which means that the construction activity is slow, which is not a good sign for any economy. If there is good construction activity happening by good building permits, which gives us the good construction activity happening by the country, which gives a sign of economic development, because without any construction activity there is no development at any part of the world. So this is developed every month, and generally if the present, you should see that the present value is higher than the previous value, which means that the country is really having a good growth, and it will give you the future economic future performance of the economy. So this is really important for even the interest rate decisions and other activities also. Then we have the next day, that is we again have US. Oh, the same day we have the CPI data, Consumer Price Index by US, which means that the same, it is like the consumer activity of purchasing the goods and services. And if suppose say if there is less of purchasing activity by the consumers, which means it's not good for the economy, and if we have higher consumption by the consumers, then which means the money is flowing into the economy, which is a good sign for any country, which can keep the inflation under control, and which gives us information that the development is happening quite in a good rate, which can keep interest rates, other decisions also under control. So this is also really a very important data for any country. And we also have the next, the core CPI data, which is also really important, because the difference between the CPI data and core CPI data is that in core CPI data we don't have or we should deduct the food and energy, which is calculated in the CPI data. If generally the energy consumption happens to be the import or the production of energy, which is oil and all the energy which is used, so if that is detected, we will really understand what really is the consumption of the country. If suppose say the people are not really purchasing anything except the power and oil, then the real economic or the goods and services cannot be calculated properly. That is the reason what we can do is, we should, if we deduct the goods and if we deduct food and energy from goods and services activity, then we will understand the real CPI data, which will help in the countries, which will help by which is going to be help for the FOMC for understanding the economic activity in the country. So related to this, the decisions of interest rates or or any other activities will be related. So you should really have a watch on CPI data, and you also should be a watch on core CPI data, and as well the building permits. This will help you in understanding if the monetary policy would be having a change in it or will not be having a change in it. That is the main important aspect need to be understood. Next we have in the morning, next day, that is Thursday, we have we have FOMC meeting minutes also in the night. Okay, in the same FOMC meeting minutes, we have all the previous reports, something like building permits, core CPI, and CPI data. And on Tuesday, we also had consumer spending data. So all this data should be considered, and then the decision of interest rate is revealed. If suppose say all the data are under control and are good in nature, generally FOMC committee also generally does not increase the interest rates, or uh, if there is really a requirement that the inflation need to be controlled and these numbers should be corrected, what happens is they decrease the interest rates. So these previous data are very important for FOMC to take a stance on whether to increase the interest rates or decrease the interest rates. So all the data is always correlated between each and others. Next, in the morning, we have monetary policy statement by Japan, and this happens to be held at Bank of Japan, which is center for all the banks. And here also the same informations have been understood by the Bank of Japan, something like the inflation values and the economic activity happening in the country, and other informations are considered so that they take decisions on whether to increase the interest rates or not to increase the interest rates, so that the inflation is under control, and it gives them the longer perspective, because Japan as in is an export oriented country, and if there is higher interest rates which will hamper the business, because if the interest rates are increased, then people might take less funds for what you call their business activity. That is really important for them. So after this we also have Bank of Japan press conference, and that is by Bank of Japan governor. He also considers all the reports and the committee information which they share with him, and then the decisions happen to be released whether to increase the interest rates or not, considering the economic outlook and the inflation and other aspects of monetary policies. So these two data are interrelated. So if the decisions like explained, if they are increased, which might create a problem for the people who, or for the manufacturers who take interest from the banks, or if suppose say everything is fine, they don't change the interest rates. That is how it function. In the afternoon, we have retail sales data, which is really important, because in UK the situation of the society is understood by this datas, where if suppose say if there is less of sales happening in the country, which means that people are really worried about the inflation and their purchasing power has gone down. So if suppose say this retail sales data is good, and the values are actual values are higher than the previous values, which means the inflation is really under control, and it also says that uh, the development activity is also very good in the country, and this gives the positive sign for economic growth. Next comes the Canadian wholesale data. Okay, this happens to be in the evening at 6 p.m. on Thursday, IST Indian Standard Time, and this says that if retailers uh, are generally applying for orders from wholesalers. If suppose they are not putting orders on wholesalers, which means that the activity or the purchasing power of people has gone down, and that is really bad for the economy, because Canadian economy also is related to the commodities market, and it generally happens to be that copper and other instruments are generally largely produced in that parts of the economy, and that can hamper the development of that country if there is less of wholesale data. So generally, it means that the wholesale data should always have a good numbers, so that we understand that that economic activity is good in the country. Next comes Chinese manufacturing PMI, which says that Purchasing Managers Index is the full form of PMI, which there is a survey of 430 purchasing managers, which says that if if this data is lesser than 50, which says that there is contraction in the economy, and if this data is higher than 50 value, which is an indicative value, then it says that the economy is going at a good pace. And currently, if we see, we have that Chinese economy is struggling. So this next data, that is on September 22nd, is also really very important data, because this will make us understand that Chinese economy is getting their way correctly or not, because recently they have also devaluated their currency. So we should just wait and watch if something good is happening to the country, so that the other countries also does not affect because of China. Next, we have Germany's flash manufacturing PMI, and it is at 1 p.m. Friday. And this say, because this is really important, is that Germany is always the big brother of European Union, and it is always been an export oriented country. Okay, so in an export oriented country, the manufacturing numbers are really important for any export oriented country. If the manufacturing numbers are higher, which means that they also have a great amount of exports, which says that if the exports are higher, then it says that it says that the economy, the money is getting into the economy, which is a good sign of economic development. And it says that 500 purchasing managers are surveyed, and if this number which is surveyed is less than 50, which means that there is the contraction happening in the economy, and if the number is above 50, which means that the expansion is happening in the country. And flash PMI is generally important because it is in the starting, or it is prior to the final PMI, and this gives us the economic clue for entire year for any country, and this can also be looked in long term perspective also. So kindly have a watch on all the data which we have discussed for now, and with this we will complete the understanding of the news for this week. And uh, and before I conclude, we request you not to consider the same discussion as the final discussion for your trading activity. As in trading activity involves this, kindly take your own risk